Back in the YouTube creator studio to talk about the Detroit Red Wings and wait for this video to get approved by YouTube for monetization status. Let's talk about some of the Wings signings from earlier today. But before we dive into that, we just gotta go out there and say, big shout out over to Jeff Petrie. The guy's going over to the Florida Panthers for a league minimum contract. The guy totally took headlines in Detroit because of the connections with his dad, Dan Petrie, Detroit baseball, fantastic story. It all came full circle with Jeff Petrie heading over to Detroit. But I don't know many Wings fans that are going to be crying their eyes out that Jeff Petrie is no longer a Detroit Red Wing. Anyways, let's talk about some of the guys that the Wings got to replace that spot in the lineup. Starting out with defenseman Ian Mitchell, signing a one-year contract with an AAV of $775,000 with Detroit. You also have Jacob Bernard Docker, one-year contract, AAV of $875,000. Now, if Jacob Bernard Docker's name sounds familiar, it's because this guy used to be a highly touted first-round pick by the Ottawa Senators. He was taken 26th overall back in 2018. He's 25 years old, right-handed D-man, and he just couldn't figure it out with Ottawa. He was sent over to Buffalo in the Dylan Cozens-Josh Norris trade, and that was a deal that I actually thought was a pretty big transactional win for Ottawa because, I mean, Dylan Cozens came in and had a pretty good streak there, but ultimately JBD was not sticking around in Buffalo. He had 4 points in 15 games with his new organization, but now as a former Nodak University Sioux alumni, he's going to be heading over to the Detroit Red Wings, potentially filling in that same roster spot that Jeff Petrie opens up. You also have Ian Mitchell, another right-handed D-man, 1999 born, a second-round pick by the Chicago Blackhawks back in 2017. Ian Mitchell played in the AHL primarily the past few years, 27 points in 47 games played with the Providence Bruins, and 1 assist in 15 games with the Boston Bruins. There was a time where Mitchell was a captain in the NCAA with Denver and the Pioneers, where Chicago fans were super excited for what he would potentially bring into the National Hockey League. This guy had legitimate top 4 potential. And honestly, you could say the same thing about JBD. Both of these guys, prospects that their drafted teams were super high on them. Ultimately, their careers took kind of unfortunate turns. Ian Mitchell didn't really work out with Chicago. He was fine in the AHL, but never really transitioned. He went over to Boston. He played the seasons over there, and then he became a free agent. Now he's in Detroit for a cheap deal. Same thing could be said about JBD, who has the pedigree of being a first-round pick. So both of these guys are potentially going to be fighting for that final right-handed defenseman spot opened up by Petrie. If the Wings have an Axel Sandin-Pellikka or somebody coming in, you can say he very well can take that spot instead too. But this is just going to be an opportunity for 2 right-handed defensemen to try to make an NHL living. I mean, the contract doesn't say one way, two way, so I'm going to assume that they're going to be making less money if they get sent down, but $875,000 for JBD, $775,000 for Ian Mitchell. Pretty good contracts if they're able to play NHL minutes. But you know who is going to play NHL minutes for the Detroit Red Wings? It is none other than JVR. James van Riemsdyk, everybody, has signed a one-year, $1 million deal with the Detroit Red Wings for his 17th NHL season. And I really, really like this contract because it provides extra value for the Wings in ways that they might not have gotten it otherwise. JVR is 36 years old, 6'3", 207 left-handed guy, super cheap contract for a guy who had 16 goals and 36 points last year. If he's able to get 10 to 15 goals this upcoming season, then it's a really good deal, I would say, for the Detroit Red Wings. Somebody pointed this out in the subreddit, but now Detroit has the number 1 and number 2 overall picks from that 2007 NHL Entry Draft. Of course, Patrick Kane and now JVR. You're not really going to get much out of Kyle Turris, Thomas Hickey, or Carl Alsner these days, but this is a pretty good piece of trivia here. Kane and JVR on the same team in 2025. Who would have thunk it? JVR has had such a good run of NHL point production over the years. His 61-point campaign in Toronto stands out. So does his 62-point season with the Maple Leafs a few years after. He was a top 6 stud for the Maple Leafs before heading back over to the Philadelphia Flyers. Then he joined Boston. Then he joined Columbus. 36 points. Honestly not bad, but the Blue Jackets were a really young team with all the likes of Adam Fantilli, Igor Chinakhov, Kent Johnson, Marchenko. Monahan's not really young, but he was in there either way. And then you had Dmitry Voronkov too. There wasn't really a pathway for JVR to have consistent playing time with Columbus. And I guess in Detroit, you could say there would have been open spots on the wing, especially with the trading away of Vladimir Tarasenko. If JVR can do everything Tarasenko did, but with a quarter of the cap hit, I think you're looking at a pretty good win here for the Detroit Red Wings and their organization. Excuse me while I go out there and publish this video here on YouTube. 11:56 a.m. There we go. But getting back over to the topic here, if you look at the Red Wings and their lines, JVR will slot in pretty nicely somewhere in that middle 6 if you want to say he could be there. Or if you throw Kasper up on the first line, you grab another center to go second line, and then you put JVR on the third line. That makes sense as well. Kane, DeBrincat, JVR, pretty nice versatile scorers on the wing. These are all going to add extra value for Detroit. And then, of course, on the defensive side of things, no more Petrie. You've got 2 guys in JBD and Ian Mitchell who can probably play reasonably better than Justin Hall. So there is a pathway here for all of these guys to potentially play National Hockey League games with the Red Wings in 2025-2026. JVR, though, of course, is probably the player with the highest likelihood of maxing out the games played. But ultimately, I like these moves. Stevie Y is listening to the fans here. He's not giving any long-term $5-6 million deals to sub-30-year-old guys who are just on the cusp of reaching their twilight years. He is not overpaying for these free agents. He's signing them for cheap. JVR, I mean, the fact that he accepted a 1-year, $1 million AAV deal is pretty interesting to me, but if he's just touring around the NHL at this stage of his career, you can't really blame the guy, right? If he just wants to see different organizations, find new opportunities, and see what fits, playing with Patty Kane, the number 1 overall pick, might be a pretty reasonable bet to make, especially if there was that spot open with Tarasenko's departure. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Detroit Red Wings signing Ian Mitchell to a $775,000 deal, Jacob Bernard-Docker to an $875,000 deal, and JVR to a $1 million deal. All of these contracts are 1 year long, and it's not really too definite what happens with them afterwards, but this is what we have for these Red Wings signings. Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.